All right, good evening. It's 5:32 on April the 7th, and tonight is our pre-agenda meeting for the Town of Spencer Board of Aldermen. And with that, I will call the meeting to order. We do have everyone present here tonight, and we will begin with an invocation. You will pray with me. Father, we thank you for the beauty of spring, of new beginnings, of growth and opportunity, with the changing of our season. Lord, we thank you for the growth and opportunity and the new season before us in the town of Spencer. Help us as leaders in this community and our staff that we may implement positive change, that we may do so in a thoughtful manner, and that we may do so in a manner that supports our residents and our businesses and those that seek to come to Spencer. Father, we thank you for the leaders that are around me and for the great work that they do. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. In addition to our normal item for pre-agenda meetings where we review our agenda for our upcoming meeting, our regular meeting next week, we have a few hearings to conduct tonight. And so the first of those is to conduct a legislative hearing to obtain public comments on a text amendment, that being SFR 2 rezoning. And it is a dimensional standard resolution. And that is attachment 1 in your pre-agenda material. And so with that, I will ask Mr. Steve Blunt to come forward and give the board an overview of that prior to opening up the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. We've presented this to you before, so I'm not going to get down in the nitty-gritty, dirty details, but we have basically 4 residential zoning classifications, SFR 1 through 3, and RMST. For a reason we've explained before, we examined the properties in town that were zoned SFR 2 and found that a number of those did not comply with the dimensional standards of SFR 2. We are suggesting that for 58 of those lots that you rezone them to either SFR 1, lost track of my paper.
SFR 3.
SFR 3, excuse me. I thought that sounded wrong. And then 9 of them to RMST, basically to make them conforming with the zoning classifications standards. We sent out a letter to the property owners of all these properties. Got responses from about 6 people just asking for clarification. Surprisingly, I obviously didn't write the letter very well. Some people thought we were actually going to come out and reduce the size of their lot physically. So. But that's before you tonight as a public hearing. We did notify all those folks. We advertised twice in the Salisbury Post, and we posted it on our website to meet legal requirements. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Blunt at this point before we open the hearing?
Could I ask one question, if I may? On this list of the rezone FR3 and subdivide, there are several places in here where there's, for instance, the Zero Hawkinstown Loop has 4 properties, but they're all empty.
Yes,
so would there be a reason that they wouldn't want to combine those?
If you're talking specifically about properties that the owner owns 2 properties next to each other, we've not suggested rezoning those because they have a solution to their problem. If they want to fix the fact that it's a non-complying lot, they can come in and have it recombined. It's a very simple process. So on those, and I gave you a memo that gave you the actual property ID numbers. On those, we're actually not suggesting that you do a rezoning.
Okay.
Now, maybe in the future, those property owners will come to you and say, I would like to sell this lot for somebody to build a house on, at that point it will have to be rezoned. But we'll let them handle that in the future. And knowing you were going to ask me questions, I actually brought my zoning book tonight so I can answer detailed questions if needed.
All right, other questions?
Do we have a map, like a map of what this looks like or when it's done?
Our zoning map has SFR2 scattered all over it. So to give you a map that you could actually see the individual properties would be very difficult. You can go on the county's GIS system and look it up by those parcel numbers and see where each one of them are. They are scattered all over town. So it's not one particular area. And I think I pointed out there were 472 properties that I found. That is a physically laborious process to go through the GIS and pick out the ones that didn't quite meet the standard. So there may be some I missed. I guess is the point I'm trying to make. We'll fix those in the future. We're trying to get the block of them fixed now.
All right, other question? All right, thank you, Mr. Blunt. At this time, we will officially open the public hearing, or the legislative hearing, for public input and comment on this specific text amendment for SFR2 rezoning for dimensional standards. Is there anyone here wishing to speak for this hearing? Seeing none, are we aware of any written correspondence for the hearing that we've received? Okay. Yes, sir. Come forward, please. You will just state your name and address for the record for us.
My name is Glen Ambrose, but I'm up here on behalf of my mom, and she lives at 419 North Rowan Avenue Extension. And we just want to clarify that the reclassification will not affect the property rights. Okay. It just like they're gonna bring it into here. Okay. It won't change the taxes or anything. Okay. I appreciate it.
Thank
Like
you.
your hat.
If you like your
Like
hat.
your hat.
Yeah, I hate it we didn't win. long we beat Duke.
Very good. Is there anyone else? All right, thank you. And I guess just to provide some clarification, since we have had the question, this is an administrative procedure. It does not impact property value. It does not impact anything related to the property. Simply based on future use, some of the sizing, basically bringing what you already have into compliance.
It will save these property owners some headaches in the future.
Correct.
We weekly get calls from appraisers or banks looking at financing, and their question is this a compliant lot? And in most cases, we can say yes. In these 58 cases, we'd have to say no. In some cases, that wouldn't matter. They'd go ahead and finance it, be no problem. They just live with the non-compliance issue. But we saw a way to fix it for these folks, and that's what we're offering you tonight, is a chance to fix a problem for these folks in the future.
All right. With that, is there a motion to close this legislative hearing?
I move to close this.
Second.
All right. There's a motion by Ms. Sledge. There's a second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? Opposed? All right. That legislative hearing is officially closed, and we will consider that item next week at our board meeting. All right. Next item is to conduct a legislative hearing to obtain public comment on text amendments for industrial zoning classification, which is attachment 2 in your agenda. And we'll open it up to Mr. Blunt to give us an overview of this one again.
Again, board, we have brought this to you in the past for philosophical discussion, pointing out that we had a problem that we were able to avoid on one current property, where the property owner wanted to expand their operation, and they could not because the IND zoning classification did not allow their particular use. The other option for them was to put an heavy industrial overlay on the property to rezone it to that. Unfortunately, the setback requirements in that classification were very extreme, like 500 feet from the property line. That also would make their current operation non-compliant. We have looked at all the properties zoned industrial because this suggested fix to that problem applies to all industrial property, not just this one particular operation. We feel that it is a good way to solve the problem that we have identified, not just for this single property, but for other properties. We still need to go through those two zoning classifications more closely in the future to make sure they are business friendly, as the mayor pointed out in a meeting earlier today. The town needs to make sure that our ordinance doesn't stop people from bringing their businesses to our town. And we will do that as we have time, but we did want to fix this particular problem now so that as that industry expands, and it's my understanding they want to expand, they've bought additional property to expand, that we won't be the one that says no to it. Any questions?
Just for clarification for the board, my understanding, this is an existing large industry within our community. It's for a significant part of our tax base. My understanding is with our 160D changes, that is what precipitated some of these issues. I can't swear that it was the 160D and wasn't existing in the old format. I didn't go back and review that because it really doesn't matter. That's gone. That's history. So looking at our current development ordinance, it does cause a problem. We're trying to fix that problem.
Now, this is separate and apart from the change to allowing a specific type of operation. Is that correct?
Well, this particular suggested revision allows SIC code 2840 to be an acceptable use in the IND zoning classification. So that's what we were suggesting, is that in property that's zoned IND, industrial, that particular classification is allowed by right.
And that matches with what this existing industry produces, and that we permitted them to do when they established operation.
My question is, do you think there are other uses in our industrial zoning that might not be permitted? Do we need to look at some of the SIC codes in addition?
The beauty of SIC codes, and we'll get a little into the weeds here for a second, is that they're very specific. And they allow us to identify an industry, because most industries have to report their SIC code to the government in various places. So it gives us a very specific identifier, and we can look it up and say, are they allowed or not allowed in this classification? The problem with SIC code is that they're very specific, and therefore we have no leeway. Either they are or they aren't an SIC code. A lot of codes do not use SIC codes, they just use a broader description of what an industry is. And by that, they allow staff to make some latitude in allowing or not allowing a particular industry in a zoning classification. You have chosen to use the SIC codes, and probably for ordinances across the county and state, it's maybe a 50-50 split. Larger communities tend to use the SIC codes, smaller communities tend to use just a general description. If there are companies that come to the town that can't meet the particular SIC code, and we by no ways have them all listed in our ordinance, then it falls to your zoning and subdivision administrator to make a judgment call. And it tells us to do this in the ordinance. We look at a similar SIC code that has the same types of impacts: traffic load, lighting, odors, etc. And then we as the administrator can say, okay, it's not listed specifically, so we're going to let you do this particular code for this particular site. I'm going a long way around to say that every project that comes to town new is going to be different. What I was trying to look at was what you had existing. And from what I've seen of your existing industries, and there's not that many big industries, you're okay. You look okay. As we move forward, we may have to come back to you and add some stuff.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I got one question. The business we're talking about, is that in our ETJ or is that in the city limits?
It's in our city limits.
That was a voluntary annexation
It
when
was
they
an
came.
annexation.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it
I
was
wasn't
voluntary. They requested to be annexed in.
Okay.
It was for water and sewer.
But as far as zoning classifications, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether they're inside or outside. We
I just
treat them the
want-
same.
sure. Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Very good. We will now open the legislative hearing. And so if there is anyone here with us tonight that would like to speak on this particular text amendment for industrial zoning classification text changes, please come forward. All right. Hearing and seeing none. Has there been any written correspondence on this subject? All right. Hearing none, is there a motion to close this hearing?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Muhammad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Howe. We do it by half a second. All in favor? All right. All opposed? That hearing is now closed. And the next hearing that we'll have, we'll invite Mr. Morris forward. We will be conducting a public hearing to obtain public comment on our Spencer Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Board of Aldermen. We have a combination of things that are happening as part of these next two items, actually. As the board knows, we have been working at a fast pace in order to prepare the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund application. There were elements of that application that were being created on the fly, in the sense that we were working toward a May 2nd deadline for the application to be submitted and preparing the documents that we needed for design concept on the park and a construction budget for a park. We also conducted a community survey that informed all of the information that we were putting together for that design and creating a Parks and Recreation master plan all at one time. And so we're at the intersection of all those things now. And so we have John Wood and Jeff Ashbaugh from Benes here. And in order for you to have a meaningful public hearing, we feel like we need to share information about the master plan tonight. And so John has prepared a presentation that will give the overview of the plan. And we have had a number of meetings about the park design. We've had community meetings. We feel like we've done a pretty good job of getting that information out there. But the community survey just wrapped up a week ago. And so this is all new stuff. And so what we would like to do is share with you the findings of that and the overarching components of the master plan, and then conduct separate public hearings on the master plan and the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant application. So I know it's a lot to throw at you, but we're sort of flying on trapeze without net at this moment. So, John, you want to take a step? Do you have any questions of me before?
Board have questions?
See the trapeze costume.
Have to find a park to put that in. Good evening, Mayor, Board. Good to see you all again. I'm beginning to feel like I'm either a resident of Spencer or I just spend a lot of time in these council chambers. So
If you're spending that much time here, you ought to be a
We
resident.
ought to be a
Yeah.
resident.
Find your place.
Yeah,
You need to
yeah,
move your offices here.
yeah, we'd be happy to have you.
Then I'd have a longer commute than Jeff does. So as Joe mentioned, we've got a lot of stuff flying around since we first started this in January, December, I think is when we kicked this process off. So I've been focused on the system-wide Park and Rec Master Plan update from your 2014 plan, as well as the PARTF grant. Jeff's been focusing on the town park design. So we're going to fold it all in this quick synopsis that I'm going to run through tonight. And we certainly have more detailed information we can provide. I think we've already provided, did we provide the recreation needs assessment and the findings from the survey, Peter? That's all been handed out. So we're just going to hit some highlights. But so we came into this process with some objectives on our own that we use as we start working on looking at a system-wide plan. Your plan's only 8 years old, your current plan. There's a lot of those components that are still valid. There's a lot of the recommendations in that plan that haven't been tackled yet, and they've just sort of moved on for another 8 years and probably need to be tackled again. So we like to measure history of the plan, history of the community. We look at the growth in the communities that we're working in. We still look at equitable distribution. Right now, a lot of your parks, as I'll show you in a second, are pretty much centralized around the downtown area and just out. And then as you get further north, you're going up 29. There's not a lot there until we get to where the new trailhead will be. So we look at, once again, how to expand, how to use what you have, take advantage of the areas that you already have that may not have developed in parks. We look at connectivity, which has become more critical each year in getting people connected, and particularly folks that can walk or bike to parks and not have to rely on an automobile to get there. How do we boost tourism? And you already have a big tourism piece right across the street. And at the end of the parking lot, another one that has popped up as we've been going through this process. So we looked at all these elements that we fold into our planning, the 10-minute rule. Do we have enough parks so we can be 10 minutes to either walk or bike, hopefully not have to drive, which is a little easier in a small town than if we were looking at a county. Then where does Spencer want to be in 8 to 10 years in terms of park and recreation? Where do you want to head? You don't have a park and rec department. Everything's done through public works right now. Is that a goal at this point? We fold all that in. And this is the map I referred to, so you can see that all of our parks are really focused in and around the downtown area, starting at Spencer Woods and working up the tiny little park there at Jefferson Street, and then really nothing now until we get up to the river on the opposite side of Yadkin River Park. We brought this image. I think most of you, if you came to the meetings, you saw this map just to show the outlay, and this was the basis for us to start our plan. And then we had a survey done. And this took the longest part because it takes a while to get the survey done. But every resident in the town of Spencer received a copy of the survey in the mail. 4 pages, and it covered more than just, if you took it, it took a little more than just, covered more than park and recreation because we've had a pandemic, so there were some questions related to that and other things that the town might like to look at. It's good to have a survey done every so many years, and we certainly had some changes enough that it warranted sending it out. So it went out by mail. We had 143 surveys completed and returned. We may still have a few trickle in, but the closing was last Wednesday or Thursday for this. And our goal was 100 originally, so we were within our 10% of the town. So that big assessment document, if you read through it, had a lot of pages to it, and I merely went in just for the sake of tonight and tried to pull out the highlight piece here. So when ETC, who was our consultant, answers all those questions and they bring them back and put them into their database and everything, they come up with an unmet needs rating. And then, Peter, you had a question about this that you emailed. And folks look at some of the questions about what are things you like to do recreation-wise that maybe aren't offered, the things that you feel we don't have here in the town of Spencer, but where do you think you have your needs unmet? Sometimes they don't always jive together with what they say they would like to see, but
when you take that and you add how important it is for folks who want to have different elements offered or maintained, they come up with a priority investment rating. So these were the top 6 that came out of the survey in our needs. And it's no surprise that walking and hiking trails was at number 1, and that certainly came out in our public meetings. Folks all during the pandemic have wanted to get outside, so we've now seen an influx in picnic shelters and being able to get the families outside and feel like they're socially distant. Social gathering, they're number 3. Playgrounds continue to be important for the kids, and not only kids and kids with special needs, even adults with special needs, being able to provide those types of activities. Fishing was a little bit of a surprise, but it popped up in there, so they must have hit the right demographic there. And then outdoor fitness equipment, being able to get out and exercise. Those were the top 6. And then that's that's everything up in the red on this particular chart. Down in the medium area, that's where we get into some of the more active sports, the tennis and basketball, volleyball, pickleball, which is you probably see more and more as that's a continuing upcoming sport. Baseball, softball fell down to the bottom, and I think more what that says is they feel comfortable with what they have at 8th Street and don't feel the need. If you add another ball field, let's do it at 8th Street, but we don't need to have it anywhere else in town. And then some classroom style space. The canoeing and kayaking, you'll see that here in a minute, sort of jumps up a little bit. Some of the additional findings, because they also pull some other data out of the survey. So we know everybody loved to go to Spencer Woods and Library Park. That's where they've been for the last year. The easiest spaces for everybody to get to. You have almost 50% that said they were satisfied with the parks you have now, but still room for some improvement or some additional offerings. Winterfest, I know, was a big success in 2021, and you had 54% of the folks who said they attended and rated it very high. A lot of folks attend the cruise-ins, so community events is important to the town of Spencer. One of the questions related to the pandemic, we had several responses there, but the top 2 were challenges in recovering were the financial hardship and emotional isolation and grief. And we certainly saw that. I know I saw it in Charlotte when you get out on the greenways and just everybody's out because they need to escape the house and get away from Zoom for a little bit. And they learned how to spend time with their family. And then we asked some questions relating to things that Spencer could spend a little money on, and the top one that we'll talk about at the end of this presentation, and we've been talking about developing some park and green space here in the downtown area, improving existing playgrounds, and then trails and connectivity popped up quite a bit. You have folks that are willing to help fund with some tax dollars, put a park or green space in the downtown, willing to fund trails to connect, and willing to fund expanding or improving on playground. Another of the more town municipal related questions with issues, answer the top 4 with better housing, increased homeownership, additional jobs, more retail development, retention, and then more of the activities and community events, which was supported with Winterfest and cruise-ins. And then, once again, how does the town support some of those through funding? So businesses was high up, Park, Recreation, Greenway, and then it moves into more family related with stability, education, and finally stormwater infrastructure. So some of the other questions that we pull out that will feedback to the town that they can use in some of the other topics. We always do community workshops as well, because you get a slightly different crowd that comes out and it's a chance to talk to folks. And we did 2 of those at the end of January. Both were drop-in. Back when we were still most everybody was still wearing a mask, so a lot of it was eye contact and talking through that. But we had at least 34 people who signed in over those 2 Monday evenings, and we were here from 3 to 6 on both those Mondays, and then stayed another hour and we did more of a presentation related to Town Park, to the HPC and the CAC in those. And it's a little hard to read, but I think you can catch it on the big screen. We had folks go through on the system-wide plan and look at, once again, facilities or amenities that they like to do, and they want to make sure the town continues to offer them, or something new they would like to see offered. So everybody got, there's a blue dot, which was your most important critical amenity you wanted to make sure that the town had available. And then they got 3 yellow dots for the next 3 that they wanted to see. So the walking and biking trails stayed the same. It's at the top. But the crowd that came in here was more focused on getting some water access. So where it was a little lower on our community survey, it was quite high in our workshops here that we have community kayak access, more green space, gardens, the multi-purpose fields, and then it starts to work its way down. So there was a little bit of reverse in a few of those. And when I get all the way to the bottom and see that the birthday party social gatherings, which scored number 3 in the system-wide, is at the bottom of our workshops, we didn't have a lot of families here, a lot of kids here. It was a different demographic. So it's good to hear from both of those and talk to everybody. We don't have it in here. We also collected a slew of comments from those, a lot of them related to the Yadkin River area and trying to make sure that we get a downtown park space in. So bringing all this stuff in, and said last Wednesday was the first time I could really look through the data that came in, and we were up here doing a public meeting for the town park. But I'd already been out to all the parks again, and a lot of things hadn't changed from 2014. But we put together another list of some recommendations that we look at the whole system. So I've got 4 categories here for facilities and programming, and I'm focused on getting the space in downtown Spencer, looking for development of a park somewhere in northwest Spencer to help bridge that gap between Rowan and Jefferson before you get to the trailhead. Outdoor fitness opportunities, which are easy things to add in the parks, or to get a greenway established along the greenway. More shelter and picnic area opportunities to pick up on that social gathering, and then upgrading all your playgrounds. All the playgrounds in town still need to be a little more inclusive, a little more accessible from an ADA standpoint, some updated equipment. A lot of them have that big plastic border around them, which makes it tough if you are in a wheelchair or a stroller or trying to get in. But so making sure and getting access to those places from parking or sidewalks. Trail connectivity sort of has its own category, and working partnerships are the way to go. So hopefully working with Rowan County and Salisbury to even connect between the river and Salisbury. Get the parks connected, more neighborhoods and schools, getting to downtown. I mean, you've got sidewalks, but now filling in some of those sidewalk gaps that get out towards the trails. Moving forward, getting that trailhead developed out on the Yadkin, which Jeff will talk about in a little bit, and even adding more bicycle lanes through. Making sure all the facilities are accessible, so getting out and doing an audit, more detailed assessment of everything, looking at shelters, furnishings, pathways, slopes, everything that we need to have to try to make sure we can get everybody into a park that we can of all ages. And then even though you don't have a park and rec department, but if there's some programming you can still do in the town, but even if it's just making sure we're providing education, health and activity in all the facilities, so any facilities that are in parks, there's a reason for them to be there, that people are using them. Splashpad has come up a few times as something you don't have in Spencer. Is that something that Spencer might want to look at as an opportunity trend? Some of the new trends like the fitness stations, disc golf. I don't have pickleball listed, but you don't have an avid crowd of pickleballers like I have in a lot of the communities I'm in yet. And then focused also on trying to make sure we have stuff for all ages to use. And the outdoor concerts, festivals, I think we're going to see some of that with the town park. Funding is always an important part of any plan, so the goal is to try to meet or exceed a minimum level of service, because your parks really can be your green pieces and your crown jewels within the town. Get people out and about, as well as your visitors that come in, visit the transportation museum. Attaining that goal of trying to get 10-minute walks, be able to get to every park. While you may not have a park and rec department, it may be a good idea to try to establish a park and rec advisory board, somebody to help when this plan is done, to help staff review some of these recommendations to keep you as a board apprised to help make decisions for the next 5 to 10 years as you look to fund things. In our final report, I'll have in the back a sort of a 10-year peek at a park and recreation CIP, which hopefully won't scare anybody. It's not meant to run away when you see numbers. It's just to say to give you something so that if the town creates their own capital improvement project, you can start to funnel some of these in over the course of the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. And then outreach and marketing, better wayfinding, make sure everybody knows where the parks are. There are communities now going to simple QR codes where when you're in a park, just snap it with your phone. It can take you back and show you what's going on in the town, upcoming events, festivals, where the nearest park is if you're just visiting and you're just over here at Rowan Park playing on a piece of play equipment, but you see Spencer Woods and you want to go out and experience a little more rustic hiking. They'll tell you how to get there. And then you've got a lot of plans you've done. You'll be doing more plans in the future, just making sure all these plans are tied together. We looked at the Carolina Thread Trail plan that was done back in 2013 and the bike ped plan, and folded those in as well to make sure we're not saying something totally different, but we understand why we did them. And then, like we did last week where you had a community forum to talk about the park, but you had all the town staff available. Do it a couple times a year and just pick a park to go to and just have a community conversation, get people to come in and just find out what's on their mind. Communities that have done that have gotten closer to their residents and users, and things come out of those. I try not to read through all these, but we also wanted to focus then on each of the parks. And all of them we already talked about an ADA audit improvements. 8th Street Ballpark, there was a master plan done a few years back for potential grant. That'd be good. You're doing some things now with that to try to bring that ballpark back. It's a good opportunity to remaster plan that area too and connect it back to the trail now that comes in from Spencer Woods. There's opportunities for there's no seating at the playground. You've got the concrete pad that sits out there next to the playground. There's an opportunity for some flex sports or make that an active sport for kids or teens. Got enough room to do some paved walking loops. Get the folks out walking and around since that's so high on our list. Shelter needs to be looked at. There's still need for parking, and then you have a partner in Three Rivers Land Trust perhaps help with some of that on the periphery as well. Library Park is still a great, nice big green space, and it certainly can continue to be used as a green space in conjunction with the downtown park when you're hosting activities. There are some areas that need to be looked at on an ADA standpoint with some of the brick that's starting to roll on the edges and at some of the turns, adding some borders to keep that in line. There's no really accessible way to get up into the gazebo. It's all stairs, and some of that decking now is starting to show its age. Opportunities to partner with the library, maybe to do a little storybook walk out there for an activity, or little free libraries. I can't remember if there's one over there now, but be able to offer that. And then some of your older trees, taking a look at some of the trees that form some of that nice scale out there and making sure that they maintain their health, but start to think ahead and maintain some of those tree lines. Plant them now so they don't look starkingly new when those big trees go down. And I think Rowan or 2nd Street Park, it has some of the bigger challenges with the topography over there. And the day I was there was a mother and a son, and she was sitting on the table there off this picture, but when they're sitting on the swing, when the swing is leaning forward, because the posts are leaning forward, it too needs a master plan, and accessibility is the big thing there. The shelter was noted back in 2014 to be repaired. It's ready just to go away and become a new shelter, new pad, new furnishings in there. And take advantage of the hills that you have with that playground. Put some little slides in, some other activities since we have the topo, and expand the playground through there. It'd be great to even have some pull-offs for parking on both Rowan and 2nd, instead of just parking right along the curb. bring some pull-offs. There's room there to do that, and then connect that with sidewalks. Not a whole lot to do with Jefferson Street. It's a pretty tiny little park. We just have a little asphalt pathway that's slowly crumbling away and a bench. And the lady who lives next to it in that house gets to look out the nice green space. But if you're in the park, you get to look into her window. So if you want to do anything, there's some minor things that you make that more towards of a garden type park. Put a little bit of vegetative screening in there to help create an edge. Add some understory, some flowering materials. It'd be nice to work with Bojangles, but maybe cutting into the fence so at least connect the parking lot and get back out to Salisbury. And then I reached hard and wide to find something for Spencer Woods. It's obviously it's relatively new. It's a different kind of park than what you have, but it does lack some simple things like some wayfinding and some maps if you're looking for that and you're trying to get out there. And there are some things that still could be added from some of the earlier plans. Now you've got that natural trail service that comes from Spencer Avenue and then wraps around to the back of 8th Street. You're adding enough in there to get more of the stabilized gravel like you have through the rest of it to help maintain that. Small parking lot on 7th Street which connects to the sidewalk. And adding another shelter out there and maybe even a more rustic type playground up on the Spencer Avenue. So general throughout the system, looking at some standardizing of some of the park furnishings. A lot of them need to be updated anyway, going to more sustainable materials, putting pads underneath all of them, setting up benches so you have a space to put a wheelchair or a walker or something of that nature. If you're taking somebody who needs some mobility equipment, and you can all sit together. The ADA audits, and then just the signage throughout to match a better wayfinding throughout the thing. All these together then, we have just kind of a little list of some 10-year priorities. There's no ranking on these. That's probably the top one is the big focus right now of getting the downtown park space. It would be good to do the ROAN sooner rather than later as a master plan. Not saying you have to move forward with any type of design or construction, but at least to start thinking about it. Same thing with 8th Street Ballpark. And then getting some greenway built along with the trailhead that Jeff will talk about that's getting closer. Looking for some locations for at least the neighborhood park, the Park and Rec Advisory Committee. Maybe developing a work plan for some type of a dedicated park staff, whether they're full or part-time or help. It's a subsidiary of the Public Works. Seeking partnerships with some of the businesses, not only from a funding side, but from maybe even a helping with the development side. And we did have some folks midway in both those surveys looking for an area for a dog park, which was in the 8th Street plan done a few years back. So looking for a location for one of those. So I've added a few circles here on our recommendations. The dashed ones refer to up north, getting the trailhead built and extending and developing that with some park area. And then also facilities expansion potential there for 8th Street Park, the town park being under construction. And then one I'll talk about here after Jeff's done talking that refers more to your old meeting space and what to do with that property. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch over to Jeff to talk a little bit about your town-owned properties and town parks.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Trying to get used to these glasses. I'm getting to the age where if I need the glasses to look down and see, but I need them. You're looking very blurry when I do that. So, and I think Joe put this very well when he said we're kind of walking on a tightrope without a net. I thought that was a great analogy. Well said, Joe. And I guess another way you might look at this too is this is one of the fastest implementations of a master plan that I can think of, because before the master plan is even done, y'all are already talking about doing a park. So,
so we're running on a tightrope, not walking.
That is even better. Well said. That's fantastic. Exactly. So good job there. So in the next few minutes, one, I always like to just say thank you for this opportunity to present to Spencer. We really enjoyed working with the community. Both John and I have enjoyed tag teaming here. Great community. There you go. So let me introduce you to Town Park, and right. Okay, there we go. So I thought I would kind of do that. And John's talked about some of your existing parks, so we're going to talk about a couple of new parks, right? And this gets into the implementation. Many of you have been coming to the drop-ins that we've had, the workshops, and heard presentations. Again, plans are still in process, a work in process, and we're still continuing to refine them. So I know there's some of the things that we've talked about that we still want to get on there, like solar panels and a marquee sign and that sort of thing, and work through those details. We'll get them added. We're just in such a sprint to make that part of application deadline. It's all a work in progress, as you might say. So, but this plan does give you a good idea where things are headed. The plan that you see on the screen, we received input from staff. It's based on input from staff and stakeholders, and also from the public, from the meetings that we had. And I think it validates some of the things that we were seeing in the survey. I think it says we've picked out some of those right facilities. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So the proposed park is, of course, located immediately in front of you, as you know, in the parking lot on the corner of 5th and Salisbury Avenue, across the street from Roger Dogs and in front of Town Hall. Just over a half acre in size, and it's shown on the screen. You might see it, but it's outlined in yellow, the yellow rectangle there right in the center. And the idea is to tear out part of the parking lot and build a park. Several access points, 3 are back vehicular, one from 5th Avenue, one from, 5th Street, 4th Street, and Salisbury Avenue. One notable thing to point out about the plan is around, there is an existing entrance down off of Salisbury Avenue, right by the current sign, right there, that we will need to either take out or move over, relocate that to accommodate the park. Otherwise, when a person is able to use that drive, they pull right into the park. That will need to move over. And then there are multiple pedestrian access points from the town's existing sidewalk network on Salisbury Avenue and along 5th Street. Park has adequate parking for anyone driving to the park, plenty of leftover spaces in the parking area, and this plan proposes, I'll make sure I see it right. Yes, it does. Okay, so this plan proposes a new reconfiguration of the parking lot in front of Town Hall, and this will provide a more safe, attractive entrance for both the park and Town Hall, and accommodate about 20 cars. The master plan proposes several amenities, the star of which is a new covered multi-purpose pavilion right in the center. You can see up there the gray shaped building. And as we saw from the survey, something that was very important to the community was, one, a more picnicking opportunities, so this shelter could be used for picnicking. And we also saw a request for more birthday parties, place for birthday parties and social gatherings. So we could knock out like a couple of the top requested items with one amenity right there. It's approximately 2,800 square feet in area, with 2,000 square feet of floor area, and it would include restrooms as well. Something else that was very highly requested, very important. And it's well connected to the parking lot and to the sidewalk system. You can see lots of new sidewalk, kind of in a loop pattern around the park space. And the event has a stage on the east side. It opens up to the east side. Great views over to the Transportation Museum with a little bit over a 12,000 square foot events lawn. Green space, again, was very important. It came out, having a downtown green space, and this space park would have one. So the shelter and green space could be used for concerts, movies, festival, even a farmer's market. It has the potential to generate revenue as well, should the town decide that they may want to rent it out. That would help offset some of the operations and maintenance costs. The park will be attractively landscaped. It was something else that came out of our conversations was that it was important to have really a nice streetscape, something more pedestrian friendly and attractive for the downtown area, and this park certainly would do that. In addition to having the green space right there in the middle, the nice lawn, it'll be surrounded by trees and shrubs and ground covers and flowers. It'll be very attractive. The design also features a couple of elements that incorporate aspects of the former park in a couple of ways. First, by incorporating decorative columns. The plan shows decorative columns at each of the entrances, almost like twin columns, if you will. And they serve as gateways to the park. The main entrance from Salisbury Avenue, that gateway may be a little bit bigger and have a heavy metal arch on top of the twin columns, very similar to the old park. And the second element from the old park is the town and one of the citizens have done a great job of keeping or preserving a couple of the light fixtures in the former park, and those could be incorporated into the design by either setting on the decorative columns or maybe mounting them on the pavilion somehow. All right, so we love talking about your park design here, but we're going to continue to move on. So let me see here. Next slide. So this, in effort to fund the park, the town will apply for a part of grant, and this coming Tuesday night, you'll be asked to approve that grant application so it continues to move forward. And the slide on the screen shows the facilities that the grant funds will pay for. And that would be the facilities in the green color, the green rectangle that we see there. The pinkish color, reddish pink color shows future improvements or non-grant funded improvements. And in order for the grant to score well, the grant process is very competitive, there needs to be at least 3 or more recreational elements constructed. And the 3 elements, we're actually proposing maybe more than the 3, but the 3 elements that we're thinking at this time would be the pavilion, the picnic pavilion is how I'll probably classify it, an events lawn, landscaping, possibly a wall mural, like an educational exhibit. You'll notice across from Roger Dogs, just down in that area, there's a wall mural. We've looked at the plan real closely. It could have an educational component to it, and then sidewalks around the park. So we're thinking those would be, some of the amenities that the grant funds would go to, should the town be awarded the grant. So regarding the budget, we believe this will be a phased project. The total cost of all phases, including the park, the parking islands, and the streets, and other landscape islands in the parking areas outside the park, is approximately $2.3 million. It's kind of, and if you're looking at the estimate, you'll notice what we're seeing here is a phase 1. Phase 1, which would likely consist of the amenities that are shown in green on the part of plan we just looked at from the previous plan, could have a budget in the $1.3 million range or higher, depending on grants, donations, and how much the town decides to spend from its general budget. But we feel like that would be a good starting point. And if you're looking at the budget there, all of the items, let's say from the top half up, where you see the 1.174798, all of that up would be kind of the phase 1 things. And then everything below that are more of the add alternates. Extra things that are outside the park area, those areas that are pink on the previous plan, and maybe even some of the things inside the park as well that could be done in the future. So you add them all together and you get the big number, but we're trying to get kind of possible phasing scenario there. So there we go. All right, so one last update. We'll talk about the trailhead. What we're looking here, this is another one of the new parks, the linear park, if you will. It's been under design. We're looking at the site plan right here that shows kind of a landscape concourse down here toward the bridge, in that square rectangle, and then a linear path that goes from the bridge all the way down here along 29 to Hillcrest Cannon. I guess it used to say Hillcrest Lane. I think it has a couple of them. And then here's an enlargement of the landscape plan of kind of the concourse there. And as you can see, it's very detailed, more of a construction drawing type of thing. We just in the last 2 days received the driveway permit for it, so it's ready. It'll be near ready to go to. We can bid this as soon as we hear back. I think we're waiting to hear back on a RTP grant that will decide, kind of have a budget impact there of on the plan. So shortly that will be going out to bid. So with that, we're going to turn it back over to John.
Few more slides. So, one of the other big town pieces of property we have is your old municipal building. And as we were talking with folks in January, and everybody wanted to put all these different things in our tiny little half acre out in the front, I had raised the question, what's going to happen out there down the street a couple blocks? So, one scenario is to consider that as another park or green space. It doubles you in size because that's about an acre, plus if you add the 2 lots that the town owns on 7 and connect it even through the alleyway that Jeff even had on the other plan, where you could do some kind of an art walk or something through there. Suddenly you have an opportunity to perhaps connect some green spaces. Your festivals can expand. You could do something with the way that site sets up. On the Fisher Street side of Bell Tower Green, if you're familiar with that, where we have the sort of iconic play equipment and some of the seating and gathering areas, might be something that could go in there, very downtown related. So we're just kind of pitching that out there as something to consider in the plan as you try to figure out what you want to do with that particular property. You could even connect it to Library Park, give you 3 green spaces in a relatively short distance to connect with activities and festivals. But where do we go from here? So we talked about the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. As Jeff mentioned, next step would be for this board to consider it next Tuesday and hopefully adopt it. Adoption of the plan helps a few extra points in the PARTIF process, not only having the plan completed and updated, but having it adopted, and then gives you some tools to work with for the next several years. Staff working with the board, if you come up with an advisory board, those entities all working together to prioritize recommendations and where they seem to fit in there, and coming up with a CIP, continuing to look for grants and funding opportunities. There are always more out there, and you never know when something may drop in your lap, either on a piece of land that somebody gives, or as we have with Town Park, somebody saying, here's some money, let's seed it and go with that. The goal is to continue to improve your quality of life, the green space, recreation. And then on the Town Park Master Plan, moving that forward, the same idea, to adopt that master plan, and then consider submission of the PARTIF grant that we've been talking about. And that particular schedule, those applications are due Monday, May 2nd, so my plan is to actually send those out Thursday, April 28th, give UPS a couple of days to truck it over to Raleigh. Our deliveries we're seeing are just like everybody, unless it's got Amazon on the side. For some reason, you can't seem to get it next day. Those awards are late. The last few years have been announced in late September, and then we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be successful. You would enter into a contract probably October, November, and then you have 3 years in which to build the first phase of Town Park. And once again, that goes further on that. So, with that, I will open it up
Yes.
to questions.
I know we're in the 11th hour,
and down to the wire on this. It's something very important. You know, looking at the diagrams a couple of weeks ago, has anyone on your staff or anyone in the town staff contacted Dr. Kenneth Washko?
Yeah, so let me give
Has
an
he
update.
been appraised?
Let me give an update on
Okay,
that.
good.
So
He owns a chunk of property that runs straight out from his office to the foundation building.
So we are working through that with them and with the Nances, our neighbors in this property. Both sets, both Rob and Beth and Dr. Washko were at the public meeting that we held. We were able to walk through some things. They had some questions about stuff, and so they've seen the preliminary schematic. Keep in mind, this is not the design. Right. This is just the general concept of what it could be, so that we can move forward with applying for the grant and get rough construction costs. There's some things we need to work through with them. We actually brought Rob and Beth in and sat down with them on Wednesday. Is that right? Tuesday. To talk through some of the logistics and things like that, and then we're also planning to have a follow-up meeting with Dr. Washko. One of the things we do have to work through is the access off of Salisbury Avenue. There's some existing covenants in place that we need to work through with him on that as well. So, but yes, the answer is yes. We're including them, and we'll continue to do so. And I would say that anytime we are having meetings, even with y'all sitting down to discuss this, we probably need to go ahead and bring the project partners in as well.
Ron, as you said, I mean, it's a master plan.
Right.
So as far as Parklift goes, you know, if we get the award, it's critical that we maintain the elements. We can still shift them around.
Okay, one of the concerns with Rob Nance was he was afraid he's going to lose some parking space for supposedly future people moving in the shopping center. Is there? I know this is outside of it, but there's a lot of markings that, of course, this guy right here did in the parking lot. Are we going to remark the parking lot with the new design to add more spaces? And also, I noticed in the areas you have planter boxes that go along the existing parking area. Is that what that is?
Those were, they were proposed just to help break up the sea of asphalt out there.
But that's taking spaces away.
Well, and this is a separate conversation that we also had with Rob and Beth on Tuesday about what the long-term plan for that parking lot looks like, including working on the drainage.
I realize that's in phase 2, but I think that's something we should consider as much as possible.
Yeah, you have opportunities probably to be more efficient with how the parking lot is laid out now and the circulation. So that's a separate.
But those conversations are just now really ramping up. Okay. And so keep in mind, we're a ways away from any type of construction.
I understand.
Yeah, then the reason I brought up Washco because several years ago, somebody dumped a plan, initial plan, and there was a fountain right smack dab, and this was out without consulting him or anything whatsoever, and he got very upset about that. So I wanted to make sure that we're all inclusive here.
And we've been in touch with them over the last week.
And they both came to the workshop on the 24th.
Yeah, they did, and we've had some follow-up conversations.
And also, along with that covenant, as you know, that's the sign, that sign has to stay. Or some kind of
a sign,
because they've already invested on $1,000 right now on new signage out there right now.
And that's one of the things we talked about, because we've talked about as a town needing some type of sign out there.
I didn't know if that's included in this or not. Are we including that into the master plan? A community sign, as far as that goes? We were talking at one time of like a digital sign.
Right now, the cost estimate, I mean, we certainly could. We've not budgeted any funds for a new.
I realize.
But we certainly, that's not.
I mean, I'm not. That would have to be in stage 2 as far as that goes. But we need to allow for that location for that sign wherever you decide to put it. Right. So let's keep that in mind when you design.
Yes.
I have a question. We were talking about the pavilion and, you know, the basic plan for it, but then in the second section of add-ons, it talks about pavilion upgrades. What are upgrades? What is going to be the base, the bottom, I mean, the flat design, and then what are the amenities?
So, excellent question. It's, so what we were trying to do.
If you can use the microphone.
What we were, kind of the thought process there is that because that is a lot of money, we were thinking that in the initial phase, there would just be a couple of bathrooms, for instance, put underneath the shelter. And in phase 2, some additional, maybe another couple of restrooms could be added as well. So maybe if you look at the plan, we've got restrooms proposed on both sides of the pavilion underneath it. So maybe in phase 1, there's just restrooms on one side. And then maybe in phase 2, there's additional restrooms. Because restrooms are one of the most expensive spaces that you can build right now. They're like over $400 a square foot. So in order to keep the cost of phase 1 down, we were trying to phase, that's what we're calling the upgrade, phase the restrooms or any kind of storage or something like that. That's.
But we're not going to end up with the steel roof and a couple of beams and call it a pavilion.
No.
Okay.
There's a nice budget in phase 1 to do a very nice covered pavilion, but it may not get everything that's desired, like additional. It may have the bells, but not all the whistles, so to speak. It may just be what is affordable in that first phase, but still very attractive, but not everything that you might want. Hope that makes sense.
As we talk about phasing, Joe, would you like to step forward and?
So I know
Phase us in.
that you took my trapeze metaphor and took it to tightrope. I'm going to go back to trapeze because I'm going to swing out and hopefully y'all will catch me. So what the mayor and I are sort of communicating about along with our town manager is the idea.
We'll catch you, Joe.
Thank you, that we go for it, that we figure a plan that does it all. How do we do that? And I think at the last board meeting, we talked about the idea of the Rural Transformation Grant, which was announced just a few weeks ago. And it is a $950,000 grant that does not require a match. And so I've been spending time learning about that and seeing what it would take to apply. And this project is a very good candidate for that grant. And so I know that we have been very deliberate in terms of working with the board when we apply for grants of getting permission from you to do that. This particular grant is, like the Part-F grant, due on May 2nd. We will have a meeting again Tuesday night. And there will actually be another round of funding in October, another cycle, if you will, for this grant. But when I registered on the application portal through the Department of Commerce, my application was number 13, which is a lucky number for me. And I think we ought to go for it.
Big positive.
So what I'm hoping the board will allow us as the staff to do is pursue this grant. And I wanted to, as Jeff and John were talking about this, it occurred to me that as sort of a bracketing comment, we have, as your staff, worked really hard to keep the cost to the town citizens for these things down. And it was the generosity of Mr. Standback who provided the funding to allow us to hire them and do this study and put together the application. So your out-of-pocket costs are pretty much limited to me. And so I feel, I don't know if that's a good value or not, but needless to say, this has been the approach, that we've tried to do as much of this without involving town funds. There may come a time when there may be a necessity to approach the town about some participation from the coffers, so to speak. I have no idea what that might look like, but at the moment, I'm just informing you about this, and I don't know how Peter would want to proceed, but at any moment, the board can say, don't do it. I'm just sort of plowing ahead, but we have an opportunity to apply for another $950,000.
And so I'd like to add to that, I've been very appreciative. I think the board has as well for the work that Joe and everybody has put in to pursuing these grants and the success that we've had thus far. What I want the board to be aware of, if you are supportive of moving this forward, is it is my commitment to work with Joe and the town and the board to reach out and raise additional funding that's going to help fund this park from philanthropic arms within our community and beyond. So, I think Joe and I've kind of looked at a plan about what we might need to make that happen. I feel very confident about being able to reach that goal. Again, so that our investment from a taxpayer dollar standpoint is kept to a minimum. But also recognizing this is an amenity that our citizens have asked for. And at some point, there's probably going to need to be some contribution from the town as well. But I'm committed to rolling up my sleeves, just as Joe and others have done with the grants, to reach out to potential donors and raise that money through a capital type campaign. And doing it in fairly short order, because we'll have 3 years in which to get it completed, right?
So we've had just tremendous support from the community. The folks that have come to the meetings, the people who have completed surveys, and I think there is a legitimate pent-up demand for a facility like this in our town, and the benefits of it. We'll be able to measure a lot of those benefits, and then there will be benefits that will be immeasurable. And so, to sort of finalize my commentary, as I have spoken to state employees and other folks who are involved in these grant processes, they have said there is no better time to ask for the money right now. And so I hope everyone here is on board with that idea. The worst thing that could happen is someone says no. We come up with another plan. So that would be my advice to the board. So, all right.
So with that, are there any additional questions for Mr. Morris or for our friends from Benesh?
I got one comment, if you don't mind, and this relates to John. John, I'd like to have a copy of these recommendations on all these parks in our community, so we can pass it on to maybe our parents committee, community parents committee, so they can look at it and see if they can help on some of these answers as far as that goes. So if
we could have the presentation electronically,
Yeah, I mean,
that way you could actually share it at one of your meetings.
we have the PDF, and then like I said, I also have a written narrative that picks up what we've talked about tonight that will also be completed by the 28th and included sort of as a front end of the 2014 plan, so it'll all be in there as well. So it'll all be public.
Thank you.
One of the elements of creating the written document is to have for comments from the public hearing. So once we have the public hearing, there will be a document we can share.
That's good. I think that's good for us to keep anyway.
It's a little bit of chicken and egg.
Thanks for all of your hard work.
Yes, Ms. Sledge.
Out of curiosity, where do we stand as far as funding for the Yates River Trail? Do we have all that
You
funding?
shouldn't have sat down, Joe.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. So, and I know that this is sort of a broken record that you're hearing from me, is that we have not received any word from the Recreational Trails Program grant. The application that was submitted months ago was for $100,000. In very general terms, we have about $420,000 on hand. The original cost estimate that we had created was at around 560. And so in working with Jeff, we would, if we don't receive the grant from the Trails program, we would value engineer the project to take out a few alternatives and get started. But I have done some inquiry with our contacts at the state, and they have encouraged us to be patient. And so at no time did they said there's no sense in you being patient. They have said be patient. So that's encouraging.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
let me just say something else. We've kind of promised this thing's going to happen this summer. And I really don't think I think we need to put a deadline, purple deadline on when we're going to put this thing up to bid with or without this grant, as far as that goes. And the longer you wait, naturally costs are going to go up. So I think we should have put a deadline. I'll leave it up to you, but I think we should put a deadline and say, all right, we don't get this grant, we're going to phase it the first 1 or 2 or 3 phases that you had. I think we need to approach it and go with it.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, there is an element of reckoning that if the longer we wait, the more expensive the project becomes, and so there may be a diminishing return that if we wait too long, we can't afford.
We're not even get it.
Right. So I don't know that I have a solution to that.
Although the other side of the coin is some of the feedback that Joe's got from the state is us proceeding in that with that mindset could put in jeopardy an award because then we've kind of negated the notice to proceed process we would have to go through should we get the award.
Yeah.
So, but that's the analysis that we have to that exercise of how patient can we stand to be, knowing that if we decide okay, well, we're just going to go ahead, we've basically written off the chances of the grant.
How patient did they tell you to be?
How thick is that tightrope?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Joe's tried to ask that
Joe
every
patient
way.
or Jonathan patient?
Well, I don't know. Someone asked this question the other night. It related to the construction of the park about if it would impact Winterfest. And I said, I've worked my entire adult life in government, and I can assure you that it will not happen before Winterfest.
Not this year.
So, but I sense that there is a workload that has been created for state employees based on a lot of the Recovery Act funds that are coming through. And perhaps I'm hopeful that some of that will be. I was amazed at well, not this one, I'm holding it up, that the Rural Transformation Grant came out so quickly. Those folks were ready. And so if we can get other parts of the government, state government on that same bandwagon, we'll have it. But I'm certainly attuned to what you're saying. It's at some point it's not going to be worth waiting.
I mean, people, you promised, or at least some people that watch this, we promised this, and if we keep putting it off, we feel like we're not doing our job.
We're not fulfilling our civic duty.
So tell me this: what is so the issue is issuing a notice to proceed to a contractor prior to the grant award.
Notice to proceed to us. To bid the project.
So we can't bid it.
And that was my question. Like, well, could we get started?
Right.
And if the award comes later, we can add back the alternates. And the answer was, well, no.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. If we're able to go ahead and begin the bidding process, and even if we have to, I mean, I recognize that could impact prices. They'll only hold prices for a certain amount of time.
Right.
But it at least gets us through that process that if all of a sudden they release the funding from the state, we can very quickly in short order be ready to move the construction.
There you go, using logic again. So. We will need to make some decisions soon. I would say, in the next 30 to 60 days, we need to, sort of
Is there anybody we should be
self-imposed
talking to?
deadline.
Is there anybody we should be talking
I actually pursued that as an idea, and I was advised to
Be patient.
be patient. I'll provide you the backstory on that. But just wait. The consensus was to wait. If they had said, no, there's no sense in you waiting, that would have told me what to do. But they told me to wait.
They've heard about us. They said, please don't let them. All right, any other questions? All right. So with that, we actually have 3 hearings that we do need to conduct on these items. The first is a legislative hearing for public comment, or a public hearing rather, for public comment on the Spencer Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So with that, we will open up that public hearing. I guess I'll start off. Have we received any written correspondence related to it? Okay. All right. And is there anyone here wishing to speak on this topic tonight? All right. Hearing none. Is there a motion to close that public hearing? The motion by Mr. Muhammad. Is there a second?
to?
Second by Ms. Sledge. All in favor? Right. Opposed? All right, and that public hearing is closed. And the next public hearing is on receiving public comment on the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant application. And so this is specifically for the Part F grant for the town park. And so with that, I'll open the public hearing. Similarly, have we received any written correspondence on this hearing? All right. Any public input tonight from folks that are attending? And seeing none, is there a motion to close this public hearing? There's a motion.
Second.
Second by Ms. Sledge. All in favor? All opposed? All right, and that public hearing is closed. And that motion, just for the record, was made by Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Ms. Sledge.
And Mayor, just to note, these 2 public hearings that were just conducted will be repeated on Tuesday. If anybody at that time would like to participate, they'll be able.
Very good. And so with that, thank you all for all your work and being here with us tonight. And we'll potentially see you again next week. Very good. All right. We will now move into the segment of our pre-agenda meeting where we review next week's agenda for our April 12th regular meeting. And so with that, is there a volunteer to give the invocation next week? Don't speak up at once.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Sledge will do that. Thank you. And then we will have approval of our minutes from March the 3rd and March the 8th. And I believe, Ms. Sledge, you've had a chance to review those and provide feedback?
I have.
All right. Are there any additional changes that are needed to those in advance of Tuesday? Hearing none, is this an item you want to move to the consent agenda?
Yes.
Right. We will then have additions and deletions to the agenda. I want to go ahead though now and give Mr. Franzese an opportunity. I think there are a few additional items that you would request that we add to the agenda. Is that correct?
Have one additional this time, and you have a few documents in front of you. So one's an additional item, and one is a modification to some existing items. So there's a letter And that is the letter that has been provided by Rusty Miller with the Friends of the Ballpark group. I think Mayor and the board, you're familiar with this letter. This is the group, of course, that's been doing the renovation and fundraising all at 8th Street Ballpark. And there's been a suggestion here of a naming opportunity for the field at the 8th Street Ballpark. And so submit this to be added to your agenda on Tuesday for your consideration.
I'll give you a minute to review that. My understanding is this is intended to be, if the board agrees to this, would be moved forward at their celebration that they're planning. When they are targeting June the 4th or June the 11th for kind of a celebration to recognize all the folks that have helped with the ballpark, and also potentially to have a chance for folks that have played there to come back and have an alumni game and do a big celebration. And so with that, this was one of the requests, the naming requests that had come forward. My thought would be that this may be an item, since it will be announced at the celebration, that if the board is in agreement, that we add this to the consent agenda. The board agreeable to that? Okay. So we will add that to the consent agenda. And that's basically just approval of that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else that needs to be added to the agenda?
The only other items are in front of you. You have 3 resolutions, and those are to go along with the items already in the agenda related to adopting. It's currently numbers 12 and 13 to adopt the master plan and approving the application. These are resolutions that would be the documents that would be adopted for adopting the overall master plan for the town park master plan, and also approving the application.
And Peter, this is not currently on the agenda.
The items are on the agenda. The resolutions themselves are not in the packet. So it's currently proposes
12
numbers
and
12 and 13.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. So it's just a matter of we've received these draft resolutions that would be adopted as the actions for those items.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Anything else from the board? Anything from staff that we need to be aware of that needs to be added? Okay. Very good. We'll then move forward with recognitions. And so we do have our student of the quarter. I assume you'll do those recognitions? Yeah. Okay. And then are there other recognitions that we need to make on Tuesday night? Okay. Not hearing any at this time. If there's anything that comes up, please please let me know.
If Christy McCrae can't come to tell about the unit today in the public comment, could that go into recognition where I just told the town about that? I'm gonna send an email to all the board.
It could, or it could also be made during at the end of the closing
Okay.
remarks, during your remarks. That'd be fine.
Okay, I'm gonna see if she can.
Okay.
We'll get back.
Okay. Great, very good. And then following those recognitions, what we'll do is we will have those 2 public hearings, one on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and then the other on the Tardif grant application. Then we will have public comment. Note there about Ms. McCrae. And then we will consider the consent agenda. So as we go forward tonight, if there's anything additional that we want to add to the consent agenda, please let me know. The next items are item 10 and 11 for the two public hearings we held tonight, the legislative hearings about the text amendments. One is ordinance 22-009 for the SFR2 rezoning for dimensional standards. And then the other is 22-008 for the industrial zoning classification. My recommendation would be to add these to the consent agenda. Since we have held the public hearings, we've discussed this the past several meetings, if the board is open to that. Is that in our packet? All right, we will hold those. We need to confirm that, and then so we'll just hold those separately then as standalone agenda items. I do want it to go on the record that Steve Blunt suggested we not add something to the consent agenda item. I find that hard to believe. Thank you, sir. All right, and then we will, we have the draft resolutions to consider adopting both the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and also then the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant application. And those do need to be standalone items because we will have had the public hearing, secondary public hearings on Tuesday. All right, the next item is a text amendment to the Code of Ordinances 22-007 for no parking in yards. This goes back to the language that was inadvertently changed as part of the 150 or 160D changes that we did, where the parking on unimproved surfaces was ended up getting removed from our code, and just re-implementing this. So we'll receive a quick update from you on Tuesday night about that, and then consider that item. The next is the water and sewer main extension policy. It's an amendment to our Code of Ordinances 22-010. This is the item that was pulled from the agenda last meeting. We have had a chance to meet with Rowan County and the EDC, which was a very positive meeting. Basically, they were in general agreement with our philosophy there. And we did indicate if they had any heartburn with it, to please get in touch with us. We told them we'd be putting it back on our agenda for Tuesday evening, and we've got no additional, heartburn from them on that. So we will consider that. And then the next item is for the a budget amendment for the 8th Street Ballpark.
Mayor, I'd be happy to go over this. This is recognizing a $10,000 donation that the town received as part of the fundraising efforts of the Friends of 8th Street Ballpark group. And so it simply is accepting that donation and appropriating it into the recreation maintenance account.
Okay. Thank you. So again, as we typically do with when we receive funding like that, we typically do like to recognize it, not put it on the consent agenda that we suggested for Tuesday. Okay. Another is, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but if we do put that in the budget, who has the authority to spend this money? Who does?
Don't look at me.
Does it go?
I do not.
Does it go to the town? Does it go to Joel? Does it go to the Friends of the ballpark?
We would receive the funding and expend funds as
we would be the town of Spencer.
Yeah.
All right. If the Friends of the park come to you and say, "Hey, we need $6,000," is that where it's going to come from? Is that what they're going to request money from you? Or
and so the way we've already had some of this occur, in that, for example, there were some invoices that we received from Friends of the 8th Street Ballpark that requested using some of our existing maintenance we had already in the budget to cover some of the fencing work, for example, and purchases of dirt that happened, for example. So as requests come along from the Friends of the A Street Ballpark, we understand that we receive this donation on their behalf and work with them on that.
So just as a detail of that contribution, it was a gift from a donor advised fund that was given to the Friends of for the use of 8th Street Ballpark.
Okay.
But the technicalities around that prevent a donor advised fund to give money to another organization, similar organization, and it was for the purposes of managing the funds, $10,000 was added to our recreation budget with the knowledge that those monies would be applied. And so the mayor sort of appointed me as a point person to work with the Friends of 8th Street Ballpark. Rusty says, we need $3,200 for dirt. We get a purchase order, the dirt gets delivered, and a bunch of people show up and spread it out. So it's a really good relationship.
That's good. I just want to make sure we understand who's getting these recommendations and who gives the okay.
And subsequently, when this started taking place, the Friends of 8th Street Ballpark had not received their 501c3
Right.
designation from the government, and they
Right.
have now received that.
Okay.
So that's in place. I don't anticipate there will be other contributions of this magnitude that will come to us for that particular project.
Well,
Maybe, I don't know.
well, one of the things we have suggested, lighting replacement
Yeah.
is a need.
Yeah.
And what they are wanting to do as a future phase is replace all the lighting out there with LED lighting. That's estimated to be $50,000 a field. I have recommended that we look at pursuing the Duke Energy Powerful Communities grant on their behalf, because I do think that would go a long way. It's exactly the type of project. So if we were to pursue grants like that and get that funding, that would be administered through the town.
And it is a town-owned facility,
Right.
and so the funds that we receive and spend on the town-owned facility comport with all of those expectations for adequately meeting the intent of a grant. And so we have a great relationship with the Friends of 8th Street Ballpark. It's a hand in glove scenario, and so we're communicating. I should give Rusty his own ring thing. Would be
And I would add
Be
that
careful.
in that light of it being a town facility, I think it is good that we are involved in this process, so that it is a little different. For example, to just have a group of nice volunteers out there, making improvements to town facilities. We certainly appreciate it, but it's good for the town to be involved in that process.
But it's my understanding they also have a GoFundMe page that they're raising money too. Do you know anything about that?
I do not.
They do.
But they are doing lots of fundraising.
They're doing
Well,
porta
that's-
pits
that's-
and
that's separate.
raffles.
That's separate.
That's
and
part of their 501c3.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not using all this money because I do know that they are doing it.
Yes,
So they've got their own fundraising events, but what the money that has come to the town has been through grants or large private philanthropic
Okay.
gifts,
That's
and
fine.
so that's
I think this is just, I'm just sharing information so
No,
that
that's
the board
good.
knows because
good.
that is something that,
It is. And,
I mean, Rusty's a good, fine person. I know,
Right.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But I think it's something we all need.
and I know that they have been working at a fever pitch for the last few weeks. When I talked to Rusty yesterday, he said he was ready to take a little bit of a break. And so I hope that sometime when the dust settles just a little bit, that we can all sit down with the town staff and his board and sort of map out future expenditures, what they're planning to do, what they're asking the town to do, that sort of thing, so that we can have not a conclusion, but a good understanding of who's doing what.
That's good. I
So-
think that's where we need as a town to kind of help him. with
Sort of an
these work-
MOU of some type.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
And if you haven't been out there recently, you ought to go out there beginning of next week. I think they're doing some more work this weekend. So It's pretty amazing what they've done. Okay. The next items are, where are we? 17. Budget amendment regarding our auto insurance reimbursement. You want to bring us up to speed on that one?
Yes, several months back there was a police vehicle that was involved in a collision, and this is to appropriate the insurance proceeds, allow us to replace that vehicle.
Right. My suggestion would be that we make this a consent agenda item.
Yeah.
Board agreeable?
Yep.
Okay.
Should we call it reimbursement? Is it really a reimbursement? I mean, we filed a claim and they're paying. Is it really reimbursement?
It's good question. Yeah, it's certainly it is reimbursement of sorts in that we're going to expend funds to
Replace the
vehicle,
right.
and the insurance
So
proceeds.
is it a reimbursement or a disbursement?
I don't have the exact wordsmithing on this provision, but I don't know that.
Yeah, typically, reimbursement is when somebody gives you back something that you've given them, and we didn't give them anything. As far as
Except for paying our insurance.
yeah,
premium.
well, paying insurance premium,
Yeah.
but that's not quite the same.
Yeah, well, in the first line, I think describes it. Actually, we received a $43,472 insurance payment. But I don't know that, looking in the ordinance, if there's any, I don't think the word reimbursement appears in the
Let's
ordinance.
call it, consider adopting budget amendment ordinance 22-006, receipt of auto insurance payment.
Thank you. I now notice we're talking about the way the agenda reads here. I was looking at the ordinance here, so yes, we can adjust that.
And then it'll go to the consent agenda.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sledge.
Over to you.
All right, next item is to consider accepting a 2021 Burn Justice Assistance Grant from NCDPS and consider adopting an associated budget ordinance 22-007.
Yeah, so this again is related to the police department. We received a 2021 burn grant, which is federal dollars going through the state, totaling about $24,500 for the purchase of laptop computers. These are the in-car computers. We currently have very old ones that are in dire need of replacement. Thanks to the grant funding, and so this budget amendment appropriates these funds into the police budget for the purchase of laptops. So that this action would be to accept the grant, provide the budget amendment. The budget amendment also in the budget process this year, we discovered a calculation error where there were some items that we had put in some detail that didn't make it into the summary roll up. And so this budget amendment is also taking care of the note there about $5,000 that we're seeing an excess sales tax revenue that we'd like to appropriate to the budget to correct some items that should have been in the police budget and were missing. And if Sergeant File may want to come up, the question was, will that address all of the police car computer needs? I think the answer is yes, is that it will cover all of the patrol vehicles.
Unfortunately, no.
No.
But so we have computers that are in excess of 15 years old. This will address 8 of them, which we're going to stagger and go and assign out as new vehicles come in, or to the newer vehicles that we have in the fleet now. So not only does it cover the in-car computer, it also covers the replacement docking stands and mounts for the cars. So even our vehicles that are a little older, we'll get the money to replace that out of the same grant funding.
Thank you.
Was there an original? I think a number I originally remember was maybe 12, but that could have been. It could be that the pricing is different than
Right,
maybe when the grant was written. And that
Yeah, I
sort
believe
of
there
thing.
was some restrictions. I actually didn't write that grant, but I
Sure.
believe there was some restrictions on the amount that you could request, and we requested right at the max amount. And pricing out between 3 different vendors, it came in we're about $200 under the max that the grant would allot. So we're basically getting the full use of it.
Okay, thank you.
So for the board, is this an item you want to add to the consent agenda, or do we want to keep it as a separate item?
Consent.
All right, next item is to consider adopting a resolution establishing a new Spencer Historic Preservation Incentive Grant Program. And so I assume that we will hear from Kyle on that on Tuesday. So we'll keep that as a standalone agenda item. Then we'll move to our departmental reports. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, did I dream that I read something about alleyways? Did we have something in this packet or somewhere about alleys? Okay, so that's planning. Okay.
Okay. And so then we will have our town manager report and then requesting comments by the mayor and board members. And then I do believe we will need a brief moment of executive session during that meeting because it is time for annual review. It's April already. So we'll get that process kicked off and then work to probably schedule a follow-up special meeting to hold that review. But we'll go into closed session to discuss logistics of that on Tuesday. And I'll have everything prepared for the board to hand out to begin that process.
Where are we with finance?
You want to give a quick update on staffing searches and where we are?
Sure. We have on the finance officer that is still. I don't want to use the word stalemate, but the number of applications that have come in has been small on that, and so we're still in a bit of a holding pattern on that one. We feel okay about our current approach to with Mr. Softly's assistance and Christy serving as our interim finance officer. Obviously, that's not a permanent solution, but we're doing okay, and we want to make sure we're patient in filling that role. It's a challenging market right now, and so that's where we are on that one. And
from a recruiting standpoint, a quick question on that. From a recruiting standpoint, if we haven't gotten a lot of applicants, are we doing anything differently to try and increase that applicant pool?
We were quite. The answer is yes, but without really much success. I think we were quite robust in reaching out with that. And that I think the suggestion from the PTRC was to, let it settle for a minute and we can try again and see what comes in from there. And but out of our initial efforts, it just was kind of a small numbers, and those that came in, we're still looking at those. Nothing's ruled out, but we're not ready to move forward with the process. In terms of
how many applicants?
I want to say it was less than 10. Less than 10, and not get too many numbers of qualifications, but it was less. On the police chief search, we've had, I'd say, the opposite with that. It was and I have a call tomorrow with PTRC to go through the initial review of what's come in. But my understanding is a healthy number of applications came in on that front. So I'll be getting more information on that tomorrow.
And then the process moving forward, time frame.
Yeah.
What
It-
is it?
Well, the goal was originally to be doing that in the April and May timeframe. Uh, I'd say we're probably a few weeks behind from where we thought we would be on the time frame, but we're still, I think, on a good path to be getting that process underway later this month and going from there.
And what about the audit? The audit finalization, is that final?
The last I heard from Mr. Softly, which was yesterday, is that they were still reconciling some issues in terms of the auditor. They still feel like they're on track to get it. It did not get submitted by the end of March, but they do. John said that they think it's still okay to get it in this month, and the current extension they were going to be within the acceptable window, but he was going to be following up with them again, and they were going to get to a point where if it did not get resolved this week, they were going to be meeting next week to move ahead. But that's where we are with it. It's been quite a process.
And the accounting firm again, their name, correct me,
Their name is RH CPAs.
out of Lexington.
They have an office there, and they have a few other offices.
A quick Google would reveal that there's some public turmoil with that company that I've become aware of. So we might need to examine that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Can I make two requests of staff? Just in looking at this, the code enforcement thing, and I realize short notice this may not be possible to do today, but just two thoughts that I had looking at this last night and thinking back on what I missed last month. I'm sorry I missed you guys last month. I would much rather have been here relative to what's going on in our household. But I guess my question is there are three different ways that you can abate nuisances. I guess I hope. There's the lien, file the lien, all that process. There's summary abatement, and then there's another statute for repeat offenders that basically gives you kind of the summary abatement. And I hope I'm not slaughtering the three statutes I'm vaguely familiar with. I do think cities and towns can abuse the summary abatement at times, but at least with one of these, maybe that should be on the table. And so I think discussing how we could use that. I think the standard is it's a danger to public safety. I don't know if we're there yet. I'm not qualified to make that decision. That's probably something you guys could help us with. But I think maybe we're there. And I think the other thing, I know when we're looking at things that I'm trying to check off my list at work, when I see a property with a mortgage on it, I kind of crack a smile because then I have an extra stick to motivate that person to get something done. I don't know if we're looking at code enforcement from, do these properties have mortgages? Do they have lenders or lien holders involved? But if we're going to step in and insert a lien, we jump ahead of the line. That gives a bank or a lender or a lien holder an incentive to get that property owner or lessee in line because they miss out on those potentially lose their security, as it were. And so, if with the board's approval, I'd like to know if we're looking at these properties that are routinely problems that we see often on our list. Do they have that extra stick of a mortgagee or a lien or some type of extra interest holder that we can get involved to help us move this process along? And with that, as an aside, I just want to know at least 3 properties on here are inactive or passive tax foreclosure and have been for more than a year. So again, coming back to my comment a few months ago, that's a problem. So and that's a lot, but just thought.
Okay.
think any additional tools that we have to move the needle forward on addressing some of these properties, I think we explore. All right, anything else? All right. With that, is there a need to go into closed session this evening? All right, hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn? So move. Motion by Mr. Muhammad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? All right, all opposed? We stand adjourned. What time is it, Miss Sledge?
7:27.
7:27.